Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is a game about kingdom coming all over the place, and today we will be attempting to beat the full game while Henry is completely enamoured by alcohol. The rules are simple: Henry must always be at least tipsy. If he isn't, then we must drink before doing anything else. But first, why don't you like and subscribe so I can continue doing what I love? Please, I'm unemployed. The game opens with a brief tutorial with Godwin, where we sip some beer and shoot some army men. After doing some drunken archery, we can finally start Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. The game opens right where we left off in KCD 1, riding off into the sunset with Hans Capon to deliver a letter to Trotsky. This game's tutorial opens up with us picking our playstyle. I made our dear lad Henry become the soldier of Hans Capon before succeeding in a skill check and rushing through camp to gather beer. Unfortunately, there was only fine wine to be found, which isn't quite to our Henry's taste, but it will have to do for now. Now that Henry's thirst for booze has been satiated, it is time to satiate his thirst for Hans, and to sword fight him with our cocks. Unfortunately, Hans wanted to save the cockfighting for later, so we commenced the combat tutorial. After rushing through it, I accidentally hit the surrender button, and we pick the rest of our skills for our dear old Henry. Naturally, I picked speech so we can attempt to talk our way out of many of our future crimes. I also picked stealth, and archery as Henry's weapon of choice. After all that talk and drink, Henry and Hans became thirsty once again for a different type of pleasure. They went skinny dipping, and Hans becomes a full-blown redditor.
Females!
Now, this very pervy section acts as the stealth tutorial for KCD 2. However, we are presented with a major issue. There is no liquor in sight. This makes our Henry very hangry and violent, which makes us fail the stealth tutorial. Now, I know what you're thinking, but since this is the tutorial, I don't count this as failing the challenge. We've just got to try and find beer as soon as possible. Henry and Hans then proceed to swim away, but first Henry is impaled and has visions of his arch-enemy, the Tooth Fairy himself. We then had to flee from the army that was hot on our tail. However, once again, we have another problem. There is still no booze in sight. In fact, there's no booze in sight until we pass the entire tutorial, so I'm just going to skip over it all because it's really not important. To summarise, Henry falls off a cliff, Hans carries his boyfriend to a random hut, we get healed by a herb lady, and then we can finally head off to Trotsky, ending the tutorial and beginning the challenge for real. Now that we've made it into a nearby little village, we attempt to talk to the girl who was at the pond, who just insults Henry.
Oof, it stinks like something died here.
When we regain control, we rush to find beer, and by find, I mean steal and drink instantly. Finally, Henry finally has his sweet nectar back, and now has the confidence to go talk to Catherine properly. Catherine informs us about a local lord's wedding, which implies a fuck ton of booze, meaning we have some work to do. The first thing we do when we get control of Henry back is we go to gamble. We met the bailiff's son, and he said if we beat him in a good old game of gambling, he'll get us into that big wedding. So naturally, we played him for it. After a short game and a lucky hand, we beat the bailiff's son, who can finally get us into that wedding. However, it turns out he lied, so in Henry's drunken rage, Henry punched him in his obnoxious little gob. I should have expected this from somebody named after an STD, but since we beat the living daylights into him, Henry got banished from the village, and Hans got beaten to death for being a pompous little snob. After reloading, we pick another fight with some twat, but this time, Hans was at our side. Somehow, even with another drunken man at our side, we lost the fight, leading Henry and Hans to wake up in the pillory, and Henry gets abandoned once again, just like his dad left him when he was a baby. Now that we are out of the pillory, Henry nicked some more beer and ran by foot to the castle to collect a big sack of coin, along with a weapon and some nice new clothes. With this newfound wealth, we ran back to the pub and bought as much beer as they would allow us to buy. Our next step is to get our perfect horse Pebbles back, so we drunkenly stumble miles to go and reclaim our boy, but not before committing some animal cruelty on the way. After convincing the stable hand to give me Pebbles back for free, we need to go and make Henry an absolute badass. We need to make Henry learn the master stroke, so he can stroke his enemies to death. To learn the stroke, we need to find Tomcat from Tom and Jerry, who asks us to beat him off in one-on-one combat. Naturally, since Henry is too wasted, we completely fuck up the chance we had and we have to try again, but not before KCD 2 turns into a point and click adventure game and my mouse stops working. While I was drinking and tending to my wounds, I ran into some humans who invited me to drink, and I just couldn't resist. The beer flowed like water, and this one geezer wanted me to come and use Henry's unspeakable charisma to talk to a lady for him. Somehow, Henry actually succeeded, and to reward us for our help, our new friend saved Henry from being beaten into a pulp. Now, in the spirit of the challenge, we continue to drown our sorrows in booze until Henry decides to take a tab of acid and start talking to a Scottish dog.
You tell me. Well, I reckon I make do with just the booze.
The next day, we finally managed to learn the master stroke. This revolutionary ability will now allow Henry to stroke it without the interference of the British government. And now that we can finally stroke it in peace, we can move on to get mutt. But before that, Henry needed some good old rest. However, we couldn't rest because we kept getting woken up by the same old soldier. He woke me up about 5 fucking times, and at this point I was so sleep deprived both in game and in real life, I killed the fucker where he stood and threw his corpse off a cliff. Henry's pa and ma would surely be proud. The next day, we made a beeline for mutt and took him on our adventure with us. Now we can start the main quest for real and start looking for a way into the wedding. We start by making our way towards the miller with only a minor amount of tomfoolery on the way. When we arrive at the miller's, he had me carrying sacks full of his balls. Since we discovered the secret of the miller's ball bags, we were made to steal a document for him. But unfortunately, since Henry is always so drunk, he flatulates everywhere, and as soon as we pick up the document, a guard wanted to search Henry, and I accidentally fat-fingered the accept search button. Now, Henry couldn't leave without this document. This left us with only one option. We tried to knock him out, and failed so miserably, we were forced to kill the guard and run away. Upon delivering this document, I was told I had to get some salt for Peter or something. I don't know. I recorded this footage about 6 months ago and I've forgotten exactly why Peter needed the salt. But I do know that Henry drank and then shoved his fist up a chicken's rectum. Now that all of our little jobs are done for the miller, we can commence with the first big mission, the wedding. For the preparations, I stole some perfume from the innkeeper and nicked a nice dress. Now that all the preparations have been made, it's time to actually go to this wedding. Now, just like any good wedding, the booze was flowing like water, and we would be fools not to take advantage, so we indulged. Since Henry is now thoroughly sloshed, we went up to talk to this nice girl Mishka, and actually succeeded in saving her from a man who I can only assume is a fan of the likes of Andrew Tate, Jeffrey Epstein, and Donald Trump. After Henry practiced talking to one nice lady, he tried talking to another, who he invited to dance. But it turns out our drunken friend Henry can't dance, since he kept putting his feet underneath this woman's shoe. It is at this point that we discover Henry's plan to infiltrate this wedding and meet Mr. von Berger himself has failed. So now, with nothing to lose, Henry tries to sleep with the bride, but Hans was not having it. He came in out of nowhere and punched somebody in a fit of rage. No one can have his boyfriend except him. This started a massive fight and ended up with Hans and Henry in jail and Hans about to be executed for his crimes of poaching eggs. Because we all know eggs are much better fried. Now we have a new objective. We have to get drunk and free Sir Hans. Our boy Henry jumped down a well, talked to his boyfriend, grabbed some wine, and then tried to ask this woman to help us, but instead of helping us and giving us what we needed, she sneakily stuck a finger up Henry's bum. We then proceeded to sprint through all of Trotsky Castle to heal the guard who can vouch for Henry and Hans' identity. This part, surprisingly, only took me a few minutes to complete, since I literally slaughtered everybody in my path and murdered the scribe where he stood. This man was the man who knew how to heal the guard, so we couldn't allow him to live. Plus, he had booze. With the mission complete, we managed to save Hans from the gallows with a very close call, and the story now takes a turn. We are now working with Mr. von Berger himself, and are waiting to leave to go to a settlement called Nabakov. So naturally, while we wait, Henry drinks himself to a stupid level and sprints to the nearest bathhouse, where it is revealed that Henry has whiskey dick.
Don't try that again. I've no need for stuff like that. Oof. I'd rather wash miner's clothes than this.
We then move onwards to Nabokov Fortress and meet some very important people to the story. A man named Jaromir. What was really strange about this place is there seemed to be exact replicas of the armour Henry and Hans had at the very beginning of the story. But none of that really matters, since Henry went to go help someone named Clara, and oh dearie dear, sorry lads, can't show this, the UK government took my gooning licence. Upon returning to Von Berger, a drunken Henry was put in charge of torture time. Now, we managed to extract the information that there is about to be a raid on the town of Semine, but Henry is a good boy and is not turning them in. However, we got so little information in the torturing minigame that we failed to convince Von Berger that nothing sinister was happening at all, and we went to go burn the town down anyway. But we couldn't have this. Henry wouldn't kill innocent people, so naturally we turned on Von Berger's men and sided with the people of Semine, killing all of the attackers. It is around this point that I have entirely lost track of the story. I just know we are approaching a crucial part of it, so it's time once more for Henry to go get wasted and go to the baths. Now you might be asking, why am I doing this? Well, Henry needs to practice for his lover, Sir Hans. Now we're at the point of no return in the story, and it starts with a house party, meaning we can finally get sloshed and absolutely no one will judge us. Henry had some pre-drinks, and the first thing he did is talk to this young widow, who went for a walk with young Henry. This man never stops. Now that it's morning, it's time to raid Nabokov, but since Henry is so drunk to the point of not being able to see, the raid completely fails, but not before fighting Jaromir, who goes down faster than Henry on hands. It is now Godwin time, my second favourite time of year. Our boy Godwin sinks a fistful of lager and then goes to find Eric. It is around this time that Godwin also runs into Jaromir and offers him a deal in exchange for Henry and Hans, who miraculously wasn't hanged. When we're back in control of Henry, we meet the Tooth Fairy, who still has Henry's beer and sword. Unfortunately, he was freed by Eric before we could gut him. Godwin managed to free Henry, and it turns out we are now working for Jaromir. Now, in his battle with Henry, Jaromir was injured with his eye being damaged. Godwin decided to save the man, and Henry was told to keep his hands off Clara, and we all know that's not going to happen. But first, we get to learn how to shoot a gun, American style. After having another lager, it was time for the Hooey special, gambling with Sir Hans. And somehow, this lucky fucker beat me in one turn. The fucking house always wins. As a consolation prize, Henry is given access to the infinite wine stash and then goes to treat the sick for Clara. Unfortunately, Henry took a detour and got started on. Naturally, we diffused the tension with our fists. Now we are back to healing the sick, and somehow Henry managed to fuck up every single skill check when trying to help the wounded, and yet somehow Clara still wanted to sleep with this man. I don't know how he does it. He's got that 14th century riz and probably the clap. That night, Henry dreams about his family being slaughtered by the evil mustache man, who proclaims his love for Henry in a very strange way.
I'm coming for you.
We are then awoken by the sound of war and flatulence, so we down some booze and watch Zizka sprint into battle at the speed of light. Unfortunately, the gang got finger blasted by the hand of God and gets captured. Hans was taken to a new location, while the rest of us were taken in another direction by the Tooth Fairy, who once again finger blasts Henry. We are then tortured by the Tooth Fairy, and since there is no booze, Henry is weak and frail, so I instantly give him all the information straight away because our Henry is a thirsty little boy. Luckily, Catherine saves us from the torturer, so we head to the Tooth Fairy to finally get our beer and sword back. Not before a quick pit stop in the kitchen for some wine though. Since Henry has become incredibly wasted, we struggle to sneak around without sharting ourselves, leading us into some sticky situations where we have been left on the brink of death. So the first thing we need to do now is find a bandage so we don't bleed out and die mid-fight. And during our search for a bandage, we ran into the Tooth Fairy and Eric, watching them as they gave each other their final goodbyes. Unfortunately, we found absolutely no bandages throughout the whole of Trotsky Castle, but we did find just enough booze and enough potions to keep ourselves going until we ran into the Tooth Fairy at the top of the castle. I well and truly thought we were fucked here, so with nothing to lose, I accepted the Tooth Fairy's invitation to a duel. And during this duel, I insulted him, his mother, his brother, his lover, and presumably his gran before killing him with Daddy's sword, finally getting Henry's beer back and pushing that fucker out of the window. Now that Henry's beer has finally been returned to him, we can finally find the greatest beer ever created that Henry has heard is only in Kuttenberg. But first, we collect our things, bandage our wound, grab the document we need, stop for more wine, and then head into the tunnels. And at the end of the tunnels, we are presented with what I believe to be the worst mission in this game. I don't know what went wrong with me, but this mission took me so many tries. I think I have 3 hours of footage alone, whether drunk or sober. This shit is just hard. I just kept dying and dying and dying, and since my health was already low, I ended up getting one-shot by an MLG sniper across the map. After many attempts and many save your schnapps uses, and one real life meltdown later, I managed to run through this area. And my advice, if you're going to do this challenge, you may want to crack open a cold one for yourself for this. Battered, beaten, bruised and hungover, Henry decided to have a nap where the Tooth Fairy invades his dreams. Luckily for Henry, this gave him the courage he needed to flirt with Catherine to prepare himself for Hans. Unfortunately, in this pseudo cutscene, Henry is unable to drink drive on his horse, so we have to wait a little bit until we arrive at Suchdol. Upon arrival, we are greeted by Peter of Paycheck, and we are told to look for the Dry Devil. First things first, Henry is parched, so it's time for a drink. We found some wine downstairs and drank a metric fuck ton before further flirting with Catherine and going to sleep. The next scene I class as one of the most immersive and pivotal parts of the whole game. Our boy Henry has a very real dream of his parents being disappointed in him, which I'm sure we can all relate to here. Right guys? The next day we grabbed our breakfast, which consisted of some Grey Goose vodka and gin, before talking to the others and starting to hunt down Yaramir's merry band of thieves. But not before Henry further practices his rizzing skills on Catherine to win her favour. To try and impress Catherine even more, Henry accepted a duel he was challenged to, which he won by consistently and viciously mocking his enemy. We have now officially entered the second map of KCD 2. This map is much bigger, and our goal now, other than drinking, is to go and get Yaramir's merry band of bastards and save Hans Capon. Our first stop is the Devil's Den pub, which acts as our hideout for the future of the game. This hideout is perfect for this challenge, since Henry can help himself to the infinite barrels of wine that are just lying around. Upon arriving at the Devil's Den, we are greeted by one of Yaramir's very good friends, Kubienka, who was getting pounded by 4 men. We decide to help the guy, and I tried doing a medieval walking drive-by on them. However, I missed, and Daddy Yaramir had to go and save Henry. Maybe there is room for 2 men in Henry's life. Also, Kubienka has a cock and ball dagger. This information is vital for you to know. Now that the cock and ball dagger has been reclaimed, we have to follow its current owner to get some guns. But first, more wine. At this point, Henry is at a level 18 in drinking, which is probably equivalent to the skill of a 13-year-old English kid's drinking ability. Once Henry did a booze and cruise to the gun location, Cock and Ball Daggerman decided to show Henry his real cock and balls while letting out a leak. However, Henry was so unbelievably parched, and since there was no booze in sight, he got on his knees and attempted to drink Kubienka's piss in hopes that he was passing through some wine. Turns out that drinking the man's piss worked. Henry was so unbelievably fucked, he couldn't even see where he was going or digging to find this stash of weapons. Eventually though, we managed to find it. It just took a bit longer than it should have. Our next recruit would be the Dry Devil himself, so we meet up with Yaramir and ambush the people transporting him. Henry prepped for this fight good and proper. In fact, he prepped so well that midway through the fight, Henry fell asleep and ended up waking up in a nearby mill. Surprisingly, this actually saved my ass, since briefly before Henry fell asleep, he took a near fatal hit and was bleeding out. Unfortunately, when we woke up, there was no booze that was worth drinking, and since Henry was a full-blown alcoholic, he was having severe withdrawals. Now, I haven't mentioned it at this point, but if you've been drinking in this game as much as my Henry has, then you develop the perk alcoholism, where if you don't either drink a hair of the dog potion or drink consistently, you will suffer the negative effects of alcoholism, such as being less charming and being over encumbered 24/7, meaning there's no fast travel. Since we currently had no booze and couldn't fast travel anywhere, it was imperative that we found some alcohol and remedied this withdrawal. We decided to walk to the nearest house we could find and waltzed on in through the front door attempting to find booze, but this pesky homeowner was there and kept telling us to go away. We were not leaving this house without booze and a short nap, so we decided to sleep right there in front of her in hopes that she would just leave us be. Unfortunately, she did not take kindly to a stranger sleeping with her husband right in front of her, so she ran to get a guard. Henry got woken up by the door of law and order, but I saw this as a perfect opportunity to try out my new perk, the Drunken Fool perk, and I attempted to talk my way out of it. Of course, I failed miserably and had to pay a fine, but it's nice to try things. With our quest to steal beer being a complete and utter failure, we decided to suck it up and drunkenly walk ourselves all the way back to the Devil's Den. But first, we stopped for some target practice and got into just a little bit of trouble. Now, our friend Henry here is a good lad and didn't want any trouble, so we paid compensation to this friendly fella. But the guy wanted to extort us and made us surrender to him again for the same crime. Now, Henry may be a good lad, but he's not a coward who gives in to extortionists. We stood our ground, loaded our crossbow, and shot the man before slicing him where he stood and taking back my cash. Luckily for Henry, the guy we murdered in cold blood had some mead on him, meaning we could finally chug some mead and fast travel to our next quest at the Devil's Den. It was here that we were instructed to look for the next members of the gang, but first we brought a fuck ton of spirits and went back to bed to recover from our previous battles. Unfortunately, as we went for our bottle of wine for breakfast, Henry had a small disagreement with the innkeeper Treadlight. Before you know it, I accidentally fat-fingered the stealth kill key, but since I didn't want to kill him, I didn't follow through with it. This resulted in a fistfight where the coward Treadlight decided to run away and call the guards on Thirsty Henry, so we decided to take Henry to the only other place he'd feel welcome, the bathhouse. Now that we were free from the guards, we were finally able to continue with the main quest. We went to a town called Grund and talked to their priest, who used to run with Yaramir and the Dry Devil. Unfortunately, this was the start of Henry's alcoholic-induced bloodlust. He saw red, and he mentally conditioned himself to believe that the priest was Jimmy Savile, so Henry shot him with a crossbow and threw his corpse into an open grave.
Show me you willing!
Our next stop is a town I can't pronounce and seeing their bailiff, where we have to free our friend Janosch from the pillory. Here, I had a plan. Our first step was to get a room in the inn before everybody hated Henry's guts, and the second step was to wing it. We first tried to pickpocket the bailiff but was caught. Then we tried to talk our way out of it with the Drunken Fool perk, but unfortunately we failed and died. It was here that I came to a realisation. For this mission we needed more firepower. I took out my gun, waltzed up to the bailiff, loaded it in front of him and fired it into his face. Naturally, Henry couldn't allow witnesses to snitch, so he knocked this lady unconscious because even though Henry is a cold-blooded killer, he tries to avoid harming women and children, which actually puts him in better moral stead than those shitheads in the IDF. After killing the bailiff, we recovered his keys and freed Janosch. Unfortunately, once we let him out, we were pursued by 3 guards, who were no match for our Henry. Once dispatched, we fast travelled all the way back to the pub, and I went to make myself a sandwich in real life. Once I consumed my chicken and chorizo sandwich, we encountered Treadlight, who was not treading light around me anymore. He immediately started a scrap with Henry, and the thing is, he actually won. Not only that, but that fucker had the audacity to rob me. This transgression would not stand. There was but one answer to his crime. Treadlight must die. This time, I did not hesitate. I snuck behind him with my dagger and slid it into his throat, just like a Minecraft YouTuber slides into the DMs of an underage viewer. We then took his beer, his money, and his keys to the shop, before going to talk to our new friend Janosch, who said to Henry he will reward him with his nice firm sausage in Henry's mouth. Now we can continue on with the main quest, which was finding the man called Adder. We went to a nearby town and immediately figured out where Adder was since he was fucking the butcher's wife. So with Henry's drunken riz, we managed to talk our way into saving Ada, who immediately got on our good side, since he said to Henry he will buy him a pint at the Devil's Den. The next member we have to recruit is a man called Raniek, who was literally buried in pig shit. Now, Henry might be drunk, but he has dignity, so instead of digging through pig shit to find Raniek, he dagged through pig shit to find Raniek. Finally, we can attempt to recruit the final member of Jeremy's band, Matthew, who immediately tried to extort me. Henry failed to talk his way out of it, so a fight broke out. I tried to escape on pebbles, but it was to no avail. He threw me off, and in the end, I died. But upon my second attempt, I managed to escape. Now that the band is back together, we can finally celebrate in the Devil's Den and drink ourselves into oblivion. During this night, our Henry got a little bit overexcited and passed out. The next thing we know, Henry wakes up in a random pub in Gutenberg with only one goal in mind: finding a man named Goatskin. With a belly full of beer, we wait at Goatskin's hideout for him to turn up, and the second he does, we slice that fucker down to get whatever it is we need. I'm unsure of what it is, but I'm sure it's important. Unfortunately, whatever we needed to get from Goatskin, it wasn't on his person, and Goatskin is actually one of the very few essential NPCs who won't die no matter what, so upon slicing him, he just lies down and takes a short nap. The next day, I return to Goatskin, and I learn the name of a man I need to meet to continue the main story. I am meant to meet a lad named Sam, who wants us to earn his trust by disrupting an anti-Semitic group that meet on the outskirts of Gutenberg. So immediately, we wobble over and get into a scrap, but it turns out it was an ambush from Sam and his men. For reasons that might be related to alcohol abuse, I lost the fight. But luckily for me, the story continues and I get taken to meet an important player in this story, a man named Lick Einstein. We share some wine with Lick Einstein, and he gives us some of the most valuable information we have found thus far. He tells us that our boyfriend Hans is being held at Malashov, so we have a new goal: free Hans with the help of the noble Rutard family. I swear, that's not a slur, that's just what they're called. And so we march through the streets of Gutenberg, but one massive roadblock stands in our way: the consequences of my actions. Henry is wanted for his treatment of Goatskin, because killing goats is considered poaching. We tried to avoid the guards multiple times and we tried to talk out of our crimes, but it was all to no avail. In the end, we were taken away to be branded, which I suppose is better than running away from guards all the time, but it comes with its own problems. Now that Henry has been branded, we are refused service from every single shop until it heals, so until then, all of our booze has to be stolen. Which I guess we've been doing anyway, so I guess it doesn't fucking matter to us, because we are awesome sauce. With everyone refusing to speak to us, we make our way straight to the Rutard's palace, and it was here that Henry met Rosa, who instantly impressed him by shooting a crossbow bolt into her foe's face. Henry was so smitten that he went and killed the rest of them to impress her back. Now, in order to secure the help of the Rutards, we need to get rid of the current mintmaster and meet a man called Mr. Paycheck. Once we meet Mr. Paycheck, we learn that we have to become a Minecraft YouTuber and go and interact with miners down in the mines, who give us all the information we need. To make a long story short, there was a bunch of talking that my TikTok attention span was not paying attention to, and we wound up in some other mine that was doing a fake money printing operation. We tried to extort the leader of this money printing operation to get as much money out of him as humanly possible, but he wouldn't pay up, so we slaughtered him like a pig and took the evidence from the nearby chest. This evidence is just enough for the Rutards to manipulate the mintmaster, so I can finally get them to return the favour and show Henry a way to Malashov. But Rosa asks Henry if we can do her another favour. She asks him to get her book from the fortress, which our Henry agrees to. Now we can finally venture off to Malashov Fortress and save Henry's boyfriend, so we neck a pint for luck and venture forth. Using Henry's alcohol-related telepathy skills, we locate the entrance to Malashov and walk through a tunnel that defies all game logic, since in reality, Henry would not be able to fit his caked-up cheeks through this tunnel. When we make it to the other end of the tunnel, we find our big bad villains, the evil mustache man, who we can suddenly feel sympathy for since he actually likes dogs. And then there's Eric, who is just pure evil, because he goes and kills that dog, and now the dog can't dog any more dog. It is here at Malashov where we finally encounter the true difficulty of this challenge. Since Henry has spent all of his time drinking and not training, he is absolutely shite at everything he does, including fighting, stealth, archery, basically anything that isn't drinking, Henry sucks at. The only way I could find to make progress here is by sneaking around the fortress and attempting to get the keys from the cook. I think I died around 50 times attempting this mission, but after so many attempts, we managed to pay off the cook and grab his keys. We also stopped off for the infinite wine barrel along the way, before entering the fortress and dying again. Don't forget though, we have a side task here. We need to get Rosa's book, which is in a room inside the fortress. So we make a detour, pick up the book, run upstairs, get to the biggest indoor skirmish I've ever seen, and then we can finally walk into Hans' bedroom. Henry is now naked and ready to fuck. Unfortunately, a Frenchman was there. We inform Hans and this random ass French guy that there's a secret exit, but Hans didn't want to go. So Henry did the noble thing and knocked his ass out before attempting to carry him all the way to the tunnel. But now is where things get a bit dicey. The Frenchman decided to give the guard some good old fisticuffs, and every time he attempted it, he fucking died. Even when I gave him a sword, this man is so ass at fighting that he just kept dying. While the sneaky Frenchman was fighting, I had to attempt to carry Hans into this tunnel, but since this man would not stop waging his one-man war, sprinting down the stairs, getting killed and repeating, I just gave up. I put the game down for 2 months. After returning in the summer of 2025 and freeing Hans and failing countless more times, we finally escape Malashov and run to dear old daddy number 2. Unfortunately, Henry's daddy has eyes for Hans, just like his son, and they run off together into the sunset. So to make Henry feel better, our lad necked a beer and went straight to the bathhouses to make himself overpowered by unconventional means. Now at this point, Henry is still branded and is in desperate need of his clothes being repaired, but since he's branded we can't get the clothes repaired by conventional means. But the worst part, the brand is just ugly and it makes me sad. So instead of getting our clothes repaired like a normal person, we just decide to say fuck it and return to Rosa, give her a book and have Henry model for her. In a different life, I'm pretty confident that Henry could have been on the cover of Ann Summers. Now, even though Henry has been refused service from every pub in town, it's important to note I've already bought up a lifetime supply for Henry, so we are secure to do the next mission and go to take the place of the waiter in the local assembly. Now, I didn't listen to a word of advice about serving the assembly, so me and Henry are just going to wing it. The one thing I do know is the only thing Henry can serve is cunt. Now, I bet you're wondering how exactly I'll drink in this part. Well, I won't. I'll just make Henry incredibly intoxicated before the assembly, and I'll have to try and get through it before the effects of alcohol wear off. And just to cover my ass, I'm going to count a hangover as still being intoxicated because that's what my driving licence says. During the assembly, I ran to get the secret dagger just in case, before waiting on people with Henry. And after ages, King Sigismund appeared, and it turns out he's ginger! He also popped up with the evil mustache man, who I have finally learnt the name of. His name is Markshart. As the assembly went on, Henry got fingered by the king, and we changed perspective to Godwin at Rabush Fortress during a party. Now, a party is a perfect place for this challenge, since I can just help myself to the infinite barrels of wine, and get Godwin absolutely fucked. To make a long story short, that Sam guy from earlier is Henry's stepbro. Hans is also sold off to be married without the knowledge of our poor old Henry. We then go down to talk to Daddy number 2, who reveals to us that Lady Stephanie, who Henry slept with in the first game, is pregnant. Guys, Henry is a dad. Now returning to Henry, it's stabbing time for Ginger Man. They recently added an animation for killing him, which was pretty badass, and it also technically means we did it, we won, we beat the game. Bye guys, I'll see you in 6 months. But that's not what you're here to see, so we'll play normally, but just know Henry got revenge on Markshart while we were here. Now, this sequence at the assembly is pretty long, so I was just jamming out to some Coldplay, but since I didn't hear Sigismund ask for wine, they kicked me out and I had to redo the whole sequence. I either need TikTok or Coldplay to keep my attention span in check. Without either, I just become a husk of my former self. So, to keep myself engaged through the whole assembly and all this talking, I just decided to stare at Markshart, who kept making kissy lips at Henry. I think this is a subtle nod to the possibility of Markshart x Henry coming true. After staring at Markvart's exquisite face for long enough, Henry managed to serve enough cunt to be invited by King Sigismund to drink with him. You know, maybe Sigismund isn't that bad after all. Going back to Godwin, we were offered a chance to gamble with the Dry Devil himself. He put his ginger carrot on the line, but unfortunately Godwin got the wrong idea and it was an actual real carrot instead of his balls. Absolutely fuming, no replies. It was finally time for some action. Rabosh got invaded and Henry was on his way back, after a couple more drinks with the king of course. We charge in, commit some war crimes, and quickly learn that the Jewish quarter is under attack, so we have to go and defend it. Nothing really happened in the Jewish quarter up until we encountered Eric. Now, for some reason, Henry decided to drink a bit more than usual before this fight, so as it went on, he progressively got drunker and drunker to the point where he couldn't see anything. But I also noticed something else a little fishy here. For some reason, Henry's health wouldn't decrease at all no matter how much I got hit. I chalked it down to just having some really good armour, but later on, I would realise there's something else afoot. Once we escaped, we completed a little investigation for Catherine and murdered the killers responsible before drinking ourselves into oblivion once again and waking up somewhere else. Since Henry awoke near Zizka, it was time to go and talk to him to continue the main story, and it turns out our next stop was Sigismund's camp, and gaining entry wasn't cheap. These greedy bastards are gonna pay. While in the camp, we took care of a stalker of Catherine's and had to catch some deserters. Now, personally, I'm more of a starter guy myself, but desert is completely valid. Oh yeah, we meet this guy Musa, who is very cool, but unfortunately, Henry starts throwing out microaggressions like it's 1403. Anyway, it's time to go find the deserters. We flatulently sneak into their base, stole their charter, and murdered someone on the way out for good measure. This mission puts us in good books with the enemy, so Henry was invited to play dice with their commander, who magically changed voices when it's gambling time.
You've got a way with words, I'll give you that.
Luck will be on my side.
I know the feeling. I also have an alternate gambling persona. I think you guys know him. He's called Hui. We now need to solve a murder in Sigismund's camp, which with Henry's newfound booze-induced telepathy he already knew how to do, but he did get into a couple of scraps with Musa's guards and slaughtered him after, which made me fail, but we are now ready for the trial. Unfortunately, after we gave these fuckers the killer, they all turned on me. Maybe they discovered I was the sneaky spy, or maybe they were just sick of my drunken antics, but either way, I think I broke them. I decided to surrender to them, leading to Henry getting whipped, but for some reason, getting arrested was not a mission failed and it locked me out of the quest, effectively bricking my save file. This shit always happens to me, and to make it worse, the game fucking crashed. Eventually, I fixed this problem by reloading a save and saying sorry to Musa's guard for punching his head in. Now we can finally complete the mission and move out with the army with the express intent of stealing God's fingering machine. We ambushed the machine with our crew, and remembering all the good times Henry had with this captain, drinking and gambling, we decided to let him live, before killing him with his back turned to the disgrace of our dear old friend Ada.
Henry, kurva, Thompson Lever.
Now it's time to raid Von Berger's hideout, but the Dry Devil wants to burn the nearby village to the ground, and Henry won't let that happen. We managed to kick the Dry Devil's shit in, even when completely bladdered. Continuing on, here is usually a pretty tough part since we have to either sneak or fight through all of these guards to open the gate for our crew. I chose to attempt stealth and then made a vital discovery. Our Henry could not die. He finally drank enough to ascend to godhood, the same way I assumed Dionysus did. But I had a worry here. Nobody would want to watch a challenge where you literally couldn't die. So I reloaded some saves, closed the game, even turned my PC off and on again, but nothing would work. Henry was an unkillable, naked god, so it looked like we had no choice but to charge through this area as the god we were and take all the punishment they could throw at me. Now, either I'm an absolute moron or I did something the game didn't intend me to do. I thought maybe this issue had been going on since Sigismund's camp and I softlocked myself, but I think it started around the time of the raid of the Jewish quarter. Then I came to the realization of how it happened. Markshart gave Henry the kissy lips of life, giving Henry eternal life for as long as he drank. So I guess this is it. The challenge isn't even a challenge anymore. It's just a colossal waste of time, but I guess that means we can speedrun the rest of the game as Naked Henry. We can drink like fuck and shag anything that moves, so let's speedrun the rest of this awesome Source game. Plus, the challenge is still technically in effect, because if I don't make Henry drink every couple of hours, I'll get the alcoholic debuff, which means I cannot move fast or fast travel at all since I'm over encumbered. Moving on, we open the gate and began our life as an invincible, awesome, naked man, and we are presented with a vital choice: to burn or not to burn Malashov to the ground. We chose to not let Malashov burn because our Henry is such a wholesome lad. Henry is literally Jesus, so he single-handedly breaks into the fortress with his tits out and fights every single guard in there, including Von Berger himself, saving Rosa in the process. Now the raid is complete and the quest was finished. A dead body rose for our new god Henry. Next thing Henry did was celebrate by drinking and going to gather Janosch's sausages before going to sleep, where Henry had a nightmare about Malashov and the Tooth Fairy. But we know this dream isn't real because neither of these men are naked. It's now basically full steam ahead until the end of the game. We interrogate our captive and go with Rosa to her house before killing the poor, which Rosa approves of. Henry knocks on her door, says he's from the hit anime One Piece,
I'm in one piece.
and proceeds to kiss Rosa, and they both end up fucking over the blood and corpses of their enemies. Unfortunately, once again, I cannot show you this since the UK has still got my gooning license revoked. I then took Henry to buy a celebratory beer and saviour schnapps for later on, before digging through human shit to get the mintmaster's key and exploring some tunnels with dear old Samuel. And by exploring, I mean ditching the man in the tunnels. The very next thing we do is JD Vance the Pope or something, I don't know, I mentally checked out. It was finally time for the final mission, so we drank some more and learnt some Italian, which I wasn't paying attention to because I didn't think I'd need it. I'm that cool. I also found Henry's dream outfit where he can serve the most. And then we go and commence the mission. In this mission, we are here to steal Sigismund's gold, and our boy Godwin is speaking Italian while disguised as the Pope. Fortunately for us, Godwin can only speak other languages while intoxicated, so it gives me an excuse to get rat-arsed and fail every single skill check. The worst of which is when he talks to Musa, and holy shit, if we thought Henry was racist, Godwin is just straight up racist. It was so bad, everyone here thought it was racist, even for 1403. We had to reload just to try these skill checks again and hope that Godwin doesn't come out with some more average Reform UK voter comments. In the end, we made it through this area and got absolutely hammered before Godwin's closing speech. Now that we are back in control of Henry, first things first, we have to get this man plastered. So we wait for his digestive potion to work so his stomach could handle another bottle of wine. Now that Henry is once again satiated, we can start fighting everybody. And once everybody drops dead after encountering Henry's godlike stature, we go to find Ada, who seemed to be having a friendly game of chess in the kitchen. Nothing else of note really happens here until we enter combat once again with Eric and his goons, but they were no match for our Lord Henry of Skalitz. Musa then comes in and saves Henry before we all escape into the tunnels and flirt with Hans some more. Once we make it to the other side of the tunnel, our boy Ada gets stabbed by the same fucking Frenchman who made our lives a living hell earlier, and Ada dies looking out into the sunset. We escaped to Suchdal and said bye to Rosa, who gave Henry an air kiss because of his drunk swaying. Godwin then chimed in a cutscene with the whole point of the challenge.
Time to get boozing!
The very next day, Eric challenged Henry to one final duel in the ruins of Sigismund's old camp. Now, to further embarrass him, I decided that our boy Henry is going in naked and isn't even going to waste his sword on him. So naturally, we beat the shit out of him with our fists, and after our swift victory, it's revealed that Mark Schart and Von Berger is coming to get their coin for gambling, but the Dry Devil managed to actually land a fatal shot on Mark Schart. This whole sequence is now completely scripted essentially. We are holed up in Suchdal Fortress, and they took all of my supplies, including my beer. What was our dear old Henry going to do? He couldn't get by without beer, but good thing there's a bit of infinite wine left in this infinite wine barrel. It turns out, Henry now commands a group of men, so I told them to drink and sleep before waking up for the night watch, and I came to another sad realization. They took the infinite wine out of the infinite wine barrel. We were so fucked. we only had a tiny amount of liquor left in our system and we had to make it last. Now it was time to do the role of Night Watcher, and we discovered there was an intruder in our keep. But luckily for Henry, the other guards were on it and started shooting the intruder before we even discovered his true identity as a person on the Epstein list. We sorted out this issue with violence and then continued on. We are now on day 11 of the raid and it is getting dire. There is no booze in sight, but somehow Henry is still drunk. My headcanon is he kept drinking all the supplies he had in his prison wallet. Unfortunately, prison wallet time was cut short and we had to choose some guys for a raid or something, I don't know. So we sent some random guys and Cockdagger Man while providing covering fire, but due to unforeseen circumstances, our aim was abysmal and we could not provide good enough support to save the men. In fact, I think Henry actually killed more of his own men than the enemy. Kubienka was the only survivor. As the raid progressed, things became more and more desperate. I was sprinting all over the fortress to find some wine out of pure desperation. I picked every lockpick I could find, and somehow I found just barely enough to get by. Moving on to day 25 of the raid, and people are so hungry they want to eat Henry's dog. Now, I'm not a monster, so I went to go eat a shoe, but I failed getting this shoe and got whipped for it twice. In the end, Henry saw red and lost his temper and started killing his own men in hopes that they had boozed on their corpses, but I got labelled as a traitor and executed. After reloading my save and eating some more leather shoes, Godwin delivers a wasted sermon and we once again run out of booze. It keeps getting worse and worse for Henry. I ran around the fortress once more in hopes of finding some booze, killing all who stood in my way, and eventually I found some mead in the tower. Now with Henry at full strength, we once again managed to push back the attackers, but even then, they took the outer bailey. All now seemed lost. There was no hope, and more importantly, no beer. All that was left for Henry was to gather some horses and get some reinforcements from the first game. We need to go and say goodbye to our friends Catherine and Hans since we have important business to do. The first thing Henry did was go to say goodbye to Catherine before having some vigorous sex. Once again, I am not showing you this because Keir Starmer will have my ass. We then went to go and say goodbye to the only person that matters to Henry, Hans, and to make sure it was a goodbye to remember, Henry kissed Hans and our bisexual kings had an evening to remember. Now it was time for Henry and Sam to run off and get reinforcements. But first things first, we need beer. I fought everyone in sight and took every single bit of liquor from their corpses. During my search for beer, I also ran into Markshart, who Henry believes was the man that stole all of his liquor. So I approached Markvart with Henry's dagger in hand, but in the end, we just couldn't do it. Markshart liked dogs and he liked wine. How could I harm a man of such taste? But then he did the final straw. He referenced Dead by Daylight.
I'll be dead by morning anyway.
Which left me with no other choice than to shoot him between the eyes. Now we had but one thing left to do. We went to find Sam, who was with that Frenchman, the man that caused us so much pain. But our Henry is a good man, and he let him live. Only to give him false hope though, because then we shot him in the back. With some more beer in our system, we carry Sam out because we are cool gamers. Of course, we have to stop to fight 50 times, but it was all worth it, because with Henry and his godlike ability, we hop on the horse and find some reinforcements. Now that Henry has rode off to get those reinforcements, we drink with Hans Capon and commence the mission that began the game. But at least we get to see Hans talk to a hort.
Me? I'm grown up now.
There's really nothing here we haven't seen before, so I'll just skip this part. It is at this time that Henry arrives with his army. We charge into the fortress to liberate our friends and lovers. Realising Henry is now sober after riding all this way, we have to grab some booze from some corpses before raising the portcullis. Now, I still thought Henry was invincible at this point, but then I got two-tapped by someone who must have been Zeus himself. But this means one thing, I'm finally mortal again. Too bad it's a bit late and everyone's dead. We said our goodbye to our friends and sharpened this big guy's sword before talking to our boyfriend and brainstorming ways to get him out of his wedding. This means the game is finally over. We did it. We rode off into the sunset on our horse and went to Daddy number 2. But Henry must have had a booze-induced hallucination and we meet our mum and dad for the final time. And here's the thing, Henry's mum and dad couldn't be prouder of him, and we told them our future plans that we wanted to marry Hans Capon, to the shock of Henry's homophobic father. But somehow we did it. We made them proud as the drunken fool we were. I have no clue how we did it after killing innocents, stealing, gambling and drinking into oblivion, but we still got the good ending. All that's left is to Deliverance our kingdom come. So we give the sword to Daddy number 2 and the game finally ends. Oh yeah, and Zizka loses an eye because everybody was drinking. Meaning the moral of the story is, maybe if you drink more, you won't lose an eye.